Hello and welcome. Welcome to another episode of A Tale of Thought and Technics. Today we're going to be focusing on the technological revolution, on the emergence of technics in the development of mankind, and thus we are approaching what we can call recorded history. So far we have been speaking about methods of studying history, about prehistory, about cosmic evolution, about everything that had come before our recorded civilizational history of mankind. And now we are setting the stage to actually delve into the rise of our human history, the development of where we came from and where we are now. And for this, we cannot but focus on technology. And technology represents the fourth system, the fourth potentially autopoietic system, the fourth self-organizing, self-perpetuating system on top of our biological, cognitive, and social systems that we have spoken of. People who know my channel will know that I've spoken about technology and the philosophy of technology quite some bit. I've taught a course at Halcyon Guild, Philosophy of the Machine. The link is in the description if anyone wants to catch up on that. There's also a book that is derivative of that course called The Machine, recently published by me. Link is in the description. If you want to support my work, purchase my book. And my book, The Machine, Reflections on the Realm of Technology, explores how technology is at the basis of what we understand as modern science, what we know as our ideologies, our understanding of nature, as well as the system that we are currently all beholden to, and also how the machine itself represents a myth that has captured us all, and a myth from which we ought to overcome and wind out of. A lot of this is guided by the philosophy of Martin Heidegger, most specifically his question concerning technology, die Frage nach der Technik in German, or another way to translate it would be the question after Technics. That essay, given at the Technical University of Munich, a university I've graduated from, speaks of the notion of technology from a more fundamental ontological or metaphysical sense. It is a question that concerns itself with how technology lets beings appear to us, how we understand our given surrounding world and its entities in the paradigm of technology. I've spoken about this before, and we will not necessarily be focusing on that essay of Heidegger in this episode. However, we will be focusing on something I mentioned in the last episode that I finished off with, and that is the technological revolutions in early history, way before we can speak of the industrial revolution of the last few centuries. Specifically, two authors have stressed this point of the importance of looking at the technological revolution from way before recorded history, speaking of the Upper Paleolithic and earlier times even. And that is, on the one hand, Lewis Mumford, who we'll be focusing on today, who focused on the myth of the machine, who coined the term the mega machine. And then further, of course, the book we are working with throughout this entire lecture series, and that is Toynbee's Mankind and Mother Earth. Chapter 5 of Toynbee's work speaks of technological revolutions in plural. And the reason he does that is because he distinguishes between two different kinds of developments in the emergence of technology. I'm going to quote him here as he speaks of something quite interesting if you want to look at the current trajectory that technology has taken, namely what Heidegger specifically refers to as the Gestell, namely the convergence of all of technology to the total positioning of the world as a standing resource, the, you could say, homogenization of the globe in the paradigm of total control through technics. Excuse me. Quote, page 39. During the period of 3000 BC until 1500 AD, the respective speeds of dissemination and innovation were reversed. Let me start a little earlier. In the history of technology, the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, which broke out about 70,000 or 40,000 years ago, was epoch-making. From this time until the present day, improvements in tools of all kinds have accelerated, and though there have been local and temporary pauses and even relapses, acceleration has been the paramount tendency in the history of technology during this latest age. During the period of 3000 BC until 1500 AD, the respective speeds of dissemination and innovation were reversed. New types of tools were invented before the previously current types had time to spread throughout the oikonomie. Consequently, the ecumenical uniformity that was characteristic of the Lower Paleolithic age gave way, during the subsequent ages, to differentiation. New inventions did not have time to travel from their place of origin to the farthest extremities of the economy before they were superseded regionally by further inventions. The speed of dissemination did not overtake and surpass the speed of invention again until after the 15th century AD. This is crucial. 15th century AD, when the conductivity of the economy was suddenly increased by the West European people's invention of a new type of sailing ship, which could stay at sea for months on end and could therefore reach every shore and could circumnavigate the globe. Within the last 500 years, the speed of both the dissemination and the invention of tools has become immensely greater than was during the first 2 million years of toolmaking. But the modern age and the Lower Paleolithic age have one feature in common with each other. In the modern age and the Lower Paleolithic age alike, the speed of invention has not kept pace with the speed of dissemination, and in both cases the consequence on the technological plane has been a high degree of ecumenical uniformity. So essentially, what we have in common now is a kind of technological uniformity. That's what we have in common now with the Upper Paleolithic age, with the age way before. So the ages in between the rise of civilization and what we would call the Enlightenment age, or the first rise of globalization, that age was determined by differentiation. You had civilizations with various different technologies and varying levels of technological advancement, such as different kinds of technologies in the Chinese Empire, different kind of technologies in European kingdoms, different kind of technologies in the Indian subcontinent, or in the Americas. Before that, it seemed that the rate of innovation was lower. Certain innovations could spread, for example, development of the spear or the bow and arrow. However, they would spread before there'd be an entirely new innovation replacing that invention. And we seem to have reached a similar stage now, where our communication network is so accelerated, so quick, so optimized, that new innovations have no way of coming up faster than they'd spread. So in that sense, the focus of the technological revolution is not just focused on the last 500 years, but he actually paints a bigger picture that cuts across many ages. And that is also something that Lewis Mumford does. Lewis Mumford is someone that I stumbled upon by watching a video of Jochen Kirchhoff, a German philosopher, that coined the term in his video der megatechnische Pharao, the mega technical pharaoh, speaking of this cultish obsession that has gripped humanity of creating a kind of godlike entity, an artificial general intelligence, this creature that is created through technology, as we see in this clip of the brilliant German old silent film Metropolis. You have this creation, you have this entire innovation network driven by the dream of creating a kind of supreme entity, a king that has the ultimate power, a king god-like power that a pharaoh has, just powered by this mega technological powers. It is something that has gripped many of the thought leaders in our today's economy, specifically in the tech sector. You have people like Ray Kurzweil speaking of the techno-capital or technological singularity. People like Nick Land have spoken about the techno-capital singularity. You have people like Elon Musk speaking about the convergence of our biological neural systems with the artificial neural systems that you have in artificial intelligence. You generally get a lot of techno-utopian, techno-accelerationist ideas promulgated, especially in the space of influential people leading modern tech companies. So it represents a kind of elitist cult. It is a cult that is relatively popular among influential, wealthy, managerial elites. And in this video, which is in German, and I understand that most of my viewers do not speak German, or many of my viewers do not speak German, thus I'll spare you with playing a lot of it, but I'll keep the recommendation here, and you can watch it with subtitles if you find the time. And there he mentions Lewis Mumford, and he mentions this kind of myth of the machine that seems to prefer and highlight one kind of human creation, and that is the kind of cold, calculated manipulation of natural processes, and that being to some extent part of us, to some extent necessary, however, only one aspect of the way we engage and understand the world, and the other aspects being, in a sense, excluded and over the time crippled and devolved, something that he sees as a great plight of the modern age, where humanity seems to make a preference for this kind of cold, rational, calculated processing of nature, and to the detriment of other ways of engaging with nature. And the interesting thing is that what he speaks about, what Mumford in this case also speaks about, is that the technological revolution doesn't begin 500 years ago or 400 years ago, but actually at this point where Toynbee speaks of this reversal of innovation and proliferation and expansion and expansion of innovation. It is precisely in the rise of early civilization that he dates at 3500 BC, which Mumford also roughly dates around that time, as he speaks of the mega machine first arising in ancient Egypt. And what he means by the mega machine there is what was necessary to construct such an enormous project such as the pyramids of Giza. To create these pyramids, you needed a highly coordinated labor force or slave force that could coordinate the force and power of a accumulated multitude of human physical strength in order to construct such a huge monument. And that could only be possible if there had already been something that we can now clearly see as a myth of the machine, as a certain myth, as a certain proto-version of the mega-technical pharaoh, in a sense, the original mega-technical pharaoh being the actual real-life pharaoh, only that in modern days, the components, the technological components, have been replaced with mechanical components that seem to highly accelerate the speed of innovation and the speed of promulgation of these technologies. But you could say the seed of that civilization was sown back then. The idea behind this, if you want to look at current or common graphical representations of technological innovation and runaway, you get something like this. You get the exponential function. The idea with the exponential function is that it starts off slow and then explodes at a certain point. However, the point at which it explodes is in a sense arbitrary. You could say it explodes at this point to the right or further or earlier. The idea is that that development has been kicked off way earlier, and you can always trace it back to an earlier point where it's been kicked off. For example, it is very common to trace the technological revolution that we have now back to the rise of, for example, the computer. You could also put it later, though, with the internet. You could put it earlier, though, with the steam machine. The steam machine being a very common one as well. Electricity being between the steam machine and the computer. Mumford even mentions other examples. For example, the clock. You can find medieval clocks in medieval China, but also in medieval Europe, that were mechanical already and had a mechanical way of keeping time. And that clock enabled a kind of structured planning of the day, a societal coordination of time, of schedule. And that is something that is a prerequisite to have something like industrialization going. You could also look at the invention of the eyeglasses. It sounds banal, but it allowed people to be able to read and follow instructions and write for much later in their age than was possible before that, at least on average. But Mumford goes back further, and he goes back to the mega machine of the ancient Egyptians. And if you think of it, it's all a question of scale. If you're looking at the scale of how much economic output has been made, then you could probably start this exponential function somewhere like 1,000 years ago, and you would see this development where it kicks off at around 500 or 400 years ago. But if you make that scale begin at the first rise of humans on Earth, of the first rise of human societies on Earth, then you would have hundreds of thousands of years potentially with no mega machine, or potentially no mega machine that we know of. We spoke of potential prehistory, and we spoke of ideas such as those expressed by Graham Hancock that are hard to prove or disprove. But you'd have hundreds of thousands of years of human societies living in a kind of either hunter-gatherer or early agricultural, or a kind of a hybrid with hunting and gardening going on in smaller societies for most of that time. And then you have a exponential kickoff much, much late in the game, and that would be the rise of the early megalithic cultures such as Egypt and Babylon. So for this, I have a quote from Lewis Mumford. Quote, "It was during the third dynasty of Ur, a period of vigorous constructive activity, that all the kings except the founder claimed divinity. This evidence decisively couples divine kingship with the characteristic public works program of the mega machine. There we have it. We've got the mega technical pharaoh, the rise of the first god king, the mega technical pharaoh. Little tasks might still be left to little man, but big tasks belonged to the king by reason of the special powers he commanded. Above all, the unique power to create a colossal labor machine. So it is obvious that this power has been extrapolated and has accelerated to an insane amount in our modern age. You could say that no pharaoh of ancient times is as mega technically powerful as someone like Elon Musk in our modern age. Or even presidents in the past. For example, someone like Franklin Roosevelt. People who have engaged in enormous projects. Just think of, for example, the Manhattan Project creating the first nuclear bomb. The nuclear bomb being a prime example of a highly coordinated technological cult managing to coordinate their labor efforts so high that they can unlock powers unimaginable, powers that are capable of wiping out masses of human life or human life on Earth in general. So to continue on from this, I want to conclude that the technology, that the idea of technics and technological revolution is something much older than we may think, than we may conventionally believe. And with time, this kind of evolution has become more prominent, and we seem to be approaching some sort of convergence point as the notion of technology has become very obvious and impossible to ignore. And in this case, we have the idea that there is a kind of dialectic, a kind of symbiosis between nature and technological development. And that is something that early on Samuel Butler brought forward. Samuel Butler being the author of the fictional novel Erewhon, that is focused on a mystical country, Erewhon being an acronym for nowhere, a mystical country that denounces the use of technology. And he is the one whom the famous or infamous Butlerian Jihad is named after, which is an aspect of the science fiction series Dune, where in Dune you no longer have intelligent robots, you no longer have AI, because there was a period called the Butlerian Jihad prior to the events happening in the science fiction novel Dune, where all of the machines were destroyed. There was a war, an all-out war, a holy war, a jihad between humans and those machines, and humans prevailed and wiped out all intelligent machines in the cosmos. You can see here that there's a kind of weariness, a kind of carefulness about dealing with technology involved in this, but there's also something very advanced about his ideas. It is something that was picked up in more detail by George Dyson, the technology historian, and son of Freeman Dyson, the famous physicist, where he has a book titled Darwin Among the Machines, with the same name as an essay written by Sam Butler much earlier. A work that is in a sense underrated because Butler lived in New Zealand and all his works would arrive in London a bit too late, after which Wallace and Charles Darwin had already received all of the praise for their work on evolution. But there's something essential that they've left out, something that you could say represents a common ground, a synthesis between the debate of intelligent design or evolution. And that is this co-evolution of technics and biological nature, where you have a kind of more advanced view of something that Richard Dawkins calls the extended phenotype. For example, birds have nests, beavers have dams. There's something that helps you survive, something that is relevant to your fitness as a species, that's external to you, that's part of the environment that you have manipulated. With humans, it works the same way, only that there is a kind of feedback reaction to it, and a feedback reaction representing a kind of symbiotic, meaning a co-development, a development where one contributes to the other and vice versa, and there's a feedback that kind of accelerates and escalates. And you see that in the development of human intelligence, that there is something to human intelligence that is derived from the current state of technology. Human intelligence, for example, transforms once written language was invented, once you didn't have to remember everything and you didn't have to learn everything from scratch, as you could read it up. Reading it was much faster than learning it from scratch. So what it meant to be intelligent had transformed once that technology of written language was there. And once that intelligence was there, the technologies at the time could be transformed, could be developed. And this led to another acceleration of evolution. In one of my essays on my Substack, which you should all subscribe to, I speak about the idea that evolution evolves, the principles of complex evolution. There's a kind of acceleration that already happened in the rise of sexual selection. As opposed to mere mitosis, there was an acceleration of evolution. Once, through sexual selection, the social environment was created on top of the natural environment, and the social environment being something that is much more intense and much more intimately related to your fitness than the pure natural environment. So every intricacy of your behavior is tested if you have to engage with a female or a male for the other sex, as opposed to just engaging with nature outside of your own species. So this acceleration is continued with human memetics on the one hand, the spread of human ideas, the capability of transferring ideas, and at the same time technology, something that it works hand in hand, something that cannot be separated. The kind of structure, the structural complexity of our memetic systems, of our memes, you could say, of our replicators of thought and ideas, that structure, the complexity of that structure is intimately related to our current level of technology. And I'd like to bring a quote here from Sam Butler that is at the beginning of my chapter 3 on the technology of the machine from my book, The Machine, Reflections on the Realm of Technology. Quote, "We are misled by considering any complicated machine as a single thing. In truth, it is a city or a society, each member of which was bred truly after its kind. We see a machine as a whole. We call it by a name and individualize it. We look at our limbs and know that the combination forms an individual which springs from a single center of reproductive action. We therefore assume that there can be no reproductive action which does not arise from a single center. But this assumption is unscientific, and the bare fact that no vapor engine was ever made entirely by another, or two others, of its own kind, is not sufficient to warrant us in saying that vapor engines have no reproductive system. The truth is that each part of every vapor engine is bred by its own special breeders, whose function is to breed that part, and that only, while the combination of the parts into a whole forms another department of the mechanical reproductive system." So the separation of nature and technology is blurred there. And it is blurred precisely because one is continuously reduced to the other. You continuously have the metaphor that we give to ourselves when trying to describe nature. We describe animals as phenotypic machines. We describe our brain as a computer. We used to describe it as a complex machine. We used to describe, in terms of the mechanical universe, the whole universe as a kind of mechanism, as a clockwork, as Laplace would understand it. On the other hand, we have what Butler has just told us. We have machines itself being part of nature, being living organisms. We have this reciprocal reduction of one to the other, this reciprocal nesting of technology in nature and nature in technology. That being something that warrants a deeper understanding and investigation into technology and what it means for our history, what it means for our identity as human beings. So, George Dyson, as a side note, who brought me onto looking into Sam Butler, he also transfers this idea to another thinker before Butler, namely Thomas Hobbes, when he speaks of the Leviathan. In his view, the Leviathan was a society as a collective organism that had a life on its own, as a cybernetic entity, as an entity that was made up of a configuration of components that were biological and technological at once. Something that's not entirely made up of technological parts or entirely made up of biological parts. I quote here from my book, Chapter 3. Machines seem to be the entities which constitute the current world. When one wonders about the crucial difference between the modern age and past periods of time, the most striking difference appears to exist in the unprecedented dynamic of the industrial system. So we see technology, if we like it or not, as an event, as a historical event, as something unfolding right now. Technics appears to be one of the most difficult concepts to untangle and categorize. Some may see it as a form of cognitive exteriorization or culmination of tool usage. The machine, however, represents the autonomy of technology. Technics is the active agent. That is something Langdon Winner speaks about as well. Look him up if you're interested. Even then, it is difficult to classify the mechanisms of autonomous techniques and their relationship to nature. For this, a coherent understanding of nature and its potential to give rise to techniques through human agents is required. In the course of obtaining this understanding, nature is treated as a holistic entity, which entails what would conventionally be referred to as the spirit or unconscious nature of man. The more technology becomes an epistemology, meaning our way to understand the world, the more cybernetic processes guide its inherent ontology in the sciences, its inherent means of understanding what there is to investigate, what there is to manipulate and study. There seems to be an important distinction, an important asymmetry about the early rise of technology and this point, the singularity we're allegedly approaching. There's something unique about what we're approaching, and that can be understood staying with our biological metaphor, with our understanding that there's a symbiosis happening, because the symbiosis occurs in a way of reciprocal parasitism. Like, it can begin with one being entirely parasitic on the other, one extracting the resources of the other. And we could understand our age as an age where all of our human efforts, all of our human desires are made subject to this autonomous system of technology continuously accelerating to build itself up. That is an idea popularized first by Gilles Deleuze and later on by Nick Land, most explicitly and horrifically, namely that technology, or this kind of age of techno-capitalism, is merely a body without organs, a kind of cybernetic monster, a cybernetic entity, a mega-technical pharaoh from the future constructing itself backwards in time. Retrocausally, you could say, where causality is inverted. The future causes the past, constructing itself backwards in time. I understand what I've been talking about is quite out there and quite a rabbit hole, but that's the entire point of this lecture series. This is not a lecture series to repeat mainstream history, but we're getting deep into the tangents. That is the entire point of it. We want to get into the deep tangents of myth, of technology, of esoteric studies of the unconscious. That is the entire part. That is the entire point of this series. So if you like it, please subscribe to this channel and like this video and check out my other work. If you want to support my work, check out my Substack, subscribe to my Substack, get my book, get my courses. All the links are in the description. So this has been a first part because I have way too much to say about technology. This has been the first part on the focus of early technology. There'll be further episodes on technology as well. And for now, I'll leave you with this, as I need to recover my voice a little bit. And I will see you next time. And also hello to some of my followers in the live chat. Nice to see you, Haris. Nice to see you, Mills8102. Haven't seen your name before. And I will talk to you next time. If there's, by the way, if there's any questions, any remarks, feel always free to leave a comment in the chat and leave a comment under the video. I do like engaging. I usually reply to all the comments, so I'm glad to have some engagement.